Hello, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the weekly podcast of ActionRadius.com. This week we will be talking about RAID. RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Drives. Now, we all must have experienced that we have many hard disks piling up in our home as junk as their capacities grow small and our need to store terabytes of movies, pictures and data keep piling up. Gamers also experience that more frequently because their Steam installation of games just keeps growing and growing, and they either have to delete those games or they will put in a new bigger hard disk and just throw out the smaller capacity hard disk away. RAID is a method to bring those smaller capacity hard disks into practical use. There are different levels of array, and this video will be just an introduction to the different RAID levels and a quick preview of how to set up a RAID array for your current system. So first, let us discuss the three most common used RAID systems for home user. These are RAID 0, RAID 1 and RAID 10. Although there are other RAID levels also, with RAID 4, 5, 6 also in common use, but those are mainly left for professionals or server owners, but for home users only RAID 1, 0 and 10 are enough. First, let's talk about RAID 0. RAID 0 is actually not a redundant system. What it does is that it takes two hard disks at minimum and then shows their capacity combined together as one hard disk. So if you have, for example, 1 terabyte hard disk, 1 terabyte hard disk, in the end it will just show you as a 2 terabyte single hard drive. So you can easily copy your data over it without worrying of space limitations of a drive. But the main practical use of creating a RAID drive is improvement of performance also. So let me give you an example how the performance of your drive read and write both will improve if you set up a RAID 0 drive. For example, God forbid, you're saving a picture of, let's say, Justin Bieber. Now, when you are going to save a picture of this, you are browsing internet and you are going to save it on your hard disk on a RAID 0 setup drive. You have two drives set up in your system for it. Then what RAID 0 drive will do is that your RAID controller will, while saving this file, split it into two. It will split the image into one part it will save on one drive and other part it will save on other drive. Now, doing so, the performance improvement that you will get is that, for example, well, for an image file, the saving time is although negligible, but if you are considering a very huge file, for example, a 10 gigabyte file or some Blu-ray movie that you are ripping from your CD, then the file size is really huge and it will take considerable time, for example 2 minutes to save that file. But what this stripping will do is that one file is being saved physically on one disk. So its speed is now it only has to store not 10 gigabyte but only 5 gigabyte on one hard disk and 5 gigabyte on other hard disk. So it will actually double your speed because each hard disk will separately store its data in its given time. So if your both hard disks were 7200 RPM, both are ideally identical, then they will be saving the data at nearly the half the time than it would take to store single file on one hard disk. So that is the biggest advantage of setting up a RAID 0 drive, that it will appear as one drive and it will double your speed. Same goes when it is going to read the data. So when, for example, if you install your video games on it and there is a constant requirement of loading the level data, the textures from the hard disk, then it can quickly do that by taking partially reading from one hard disk, partially reading from one hard disk, and then the RAID controller will combine them back in half the time as it would take on one hard disk. This setup can be done on a SATA hard disk, on SSDs. So as long as you have two drives, RAID 0 is very good for improving the performance especially. There is one disadvantage of RAID 0, and that is lowering the reliability of your data backup. So RAID 0 is not recommended for your critical data which you cannot recover, because what will happen, just consider that if your one hard disk fails, then you will be left only with half your data, and it is of no use. Technically, it's more complicated than just half a picture, because it's going bit by bit alternatively to each hard disk. So actually you will have some random bits stored on one of your left alive hard disk, and you will not be able to recover any useful data from those partial bits. So once your one hard disk fails, both of your hard disk data will be gone. You can set up multiple hard drives in RAID 0 setup, but the more drives you add in your RAID setup, even failure of a single drive will cause a catastrophic failure of all your data. That is the biggest disadvantage. So it is not recommended for your critical documents, but we can easily use it for example, your Steam games, because you can always re-download your Steam game. Now coming to the next setup, the RAID 1. For that, let's take example of, for example, you are going to save a picture of Megan Fox. Now in RAID 1, again you will have two disks, but what it will do this time is it will not strip the data to save on both drives. What it will do is that when you are saving the image, it will actually create a copy of that image, and on both drives it will store that image. Now this does not improve any performance, because it's the same amount of file. If it was a 10 GB file, it's still a 10 GB file being saved on two different drives. So there is no performance improvement for writing. But if you have a good RAID controller, then the reading performance will still be improved, because what it will do is that while reading the file, because the hard disk knows that, or your controller knows that the same file exists on two hard disks. So partially it will read from drive A and partially it will read from drive B, and your RAID controller can slightly improve your reading performance. So in the end, the capacity that you will have is equivalent to only one of your drives. So if you had a 1 TB drive available with you and 1 TB is your drive B, then in the end you will be only utilizing 1 TB in total, because the other 1 TB is being used only for backups. The advantage that you will get is that in case of a catastrophic failure, that one of your drive fails, for example your primary drive A has failed, then you will still be able to use drive B and recover all your data and save your data, which is very dear and critical to you. So that is the main advantage of RAID 1 setup, that it creates essentially a backup drive for your data. So you have used, this is the true meaning of redundant array, that you have used your extra drive as a backup drive. Of course, we can always use backup softwares, but they are normally scheduled for either daily backup or weekly backup for selected folders. But this is a pure hardware solution to create a backup of each and every file in every identical manner without putting any extra software on your system. So this is the RAID 1 setup. Now talking about the RAID 10 or RAID 1 plus 0. What RAID 10 is actually a combination of RAID 0 and RAID 1. What it will do is that it will create, just like RAID 1, 2 copies of your data. Then it will also strip it on multiple drives. So you will need a minimum of 4 drives for this to work. That your data is stripped as well as stored on multiple drives. So in case in all of your 4 drives, one of the drive fails, then an identical drive with having that partial data will still exist. So that is RAID 10. It will require extra drives, but it's safer as well as providing you that speed and performance improvement of both read and write in the RAID 0 setup. So these are the 3 most common RAID setups that you can do in your home with your extra hard drives. As long as you have extra SATA cables or SATA ports in your motherboard to connect all those drives, and as long as you have the power supply to support your hard drives, you can put multiple hard drives in a system to improve your performance or improve your reliability, or both, based on the number of drives you can put and the number of level of RAID you set up. So that was all about the introduction of those 3 basic levels of RAID. Now let's have a look at how we can set up RAID on actual system. You normally would have to go to your BIOS setting, which you can normally go by pressing the delete key or whatever the key is indicated while booting your system. To go to the BIOS, and because every system has a different BIOS version and as well as BIOS software installed on that system, so it's not easy to explain it in general. Most probably you can find the setting in your manual how to go in your BIOS to that setting, but as a general rules we will show you some of the BIOS and where you can find that setting for setting up a RAID. So normally what you would have to do is go in BIOS setting of hard drives, and then you will set your SATA settings to RAID rather than IDE or AHCI. Once you set up to RAID, this is only part 1 of the step. You will have to save your BIOS setting and reboot. Once you reboot, either you will get a separate remote to go to the RAID utility in your BIOS, or you will have, if you don't get any separate remote, then your BIOS has built-in RAID utility and you will have to re-enter your BIOS, and now this time you will get the RAID utility tab or option visible in your BIOS. So to conclude, actually you will not be able to see the RAID utility in your system until you first set up the RAID setting in your BIOS. Once you go in the RAID setup utility, then you will be able to see all your hard drives as independent drives right now, and you will be able to see an option to create a RAID drive by combining 2 or more of the drives. Then you will be able to assign a drive letter, assign a drive name, and select the RAID level there. So based on the type of data you are going to store, as we already explained, you can set up RAID 0, 1 or 10. Hopefully you found it useful, and now you can bring to good use your redundant hard drives sitting in your house just eating dust right now. Coming to the next segment of our weekly podcast, the giveaways. Last week we had a copy of Zombie Driver to give away, and the lucky winner is Ali Farhan 84. Congratulations, you have won yourself a copy of Zombie Driver. For this week we have a Steam copy of don't ask me about the name, it's a game about jumping. So you have to jump through hoops, and we have a Steam copy of this fun arcade game to give away, and all you have to do is leave a comment below telling us what did you think of this introduction or tip video, and if you have any of your RAID experience to share with us, then please do so in the comments below, and your comment will mark your entry for the giveaway. and next time you could be lucky winner of That's it for this week. Hopefully see you next time inshallah also. Take care. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.